Greetings, welcome. So where we last left off, I was trying to psych myself up to be excited about winding coils, which is of course boring as heck, and it didn't disappoint. It was terribly boring, and I was wrong. And this time, this rare occasion, I didn't make a jackass of myself through my own fault though. And therein lies a tale, but that's for another video. But the long and short of it is, you can't just go with smaller and smaller air cores, and don't believe everything you see on the internet. That's what it boils down to, even when it seems authoritative. Let's leave that for another video. Except to suffice it to say, back to the like 4 foot tall, 1 foot wide coil or something like that. But let's talk about something different. I have been looking as well while I was doing the winding. I have also been looking at some other stuff related, sort of going back to the one-wire power and the bifilar coil. And I don't have anything useful yet, just strange. I think if I had something really useful, I probably wouldn't be able to bring myself to talk about it. Figure it out yourself. But I don't have something useful, but I have a lot of strangeness. So let's just do a video, and I'm also just going to be replicating a lot of this for my own sake. And there's the Clancy brothers on Finnegan's Wake, and I guess James Joyce also wrote a little bit with a little book of that title too, but he's kind of a weird author, huh? Kind of hard to follow. But the Clancy Brothers song, which is how I know it, it starts off as this very somber wake, and then people start disagreeing and then fighting, and then it just turns to a big brawl, and then someone hits Timothy the corpse, hits him with a bottle of whiskey, and splashes all over him. He wakes up. he was just passed out. He wasn't dead. So the point I'm bringing that up is it's sort of a good motif for this, is that this starts off perfectly normal, and then it starts getting strange, and then it starts getting stranger. And then there have been numerous times where I've been saying, you've got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. And as I said, I don't know entirely what to make of it. And then after I do know something to make of it, there's a big difference between seeing something strange and having something useful. And I don't have anything useful, but I have a lot of strange stuff to share. And I'll also say, this isn't anything new. I would say, it goes back to Tesla. That was crazy, wasn't he? But this is looking at a bifilar coil. And so, of course, we're dealing with the near magnetic field. So rather than trying to just talk through this, let's just show it. And as I said, I'm going to just try and start as simple as can be, and then it begins to. Okay, so here we go. So to start at the beginning, here we have a coil, and there's nothing special about it. It's except for that it's bifilar. So bifilar means that there's 2 winds on each end. So you take those 2 winds and you wrap it around. This one has about 10 layers on it of 26 gauge wire, and it actually has a lower Q factor than this large single layer coil. This one has approximately 8.5 millihenries of induction, and this one I think has about 12, but it's a little bit nicer form factor. It doesn't have a low Q factor, it doesn't have a spectacular Q factor. And as I said, it's a little worse than this one, but I wanted to start to slow things down. I mean, eventually I'm going to want a bit more induction than 14 millihenries. So here's our bifilar part. Two windings. Here is our capacitor. So here are two bus lines, positive and negative. You see the positive goes to this switch and the negative goes to this switch. There is one trigger, which is this line, pin 13. Goes out to here, turns this one on, and then you see this guy here, he goes over there and then to ground, so it turns on both switches at the same time. When that happens, power flows from the positive into here, across that switch, and from the negative out here to here through the other switch. That turns off, and these are opto-isolated relays. So now you have just a cap just sitting here, right? There's no connection back to ground because it's blocked. There's no connection to the Arduino because it's opto-isolated. So that's all well and good. We charged up a capacitor then when we turned these switches on. And then we have it sitting there. So if we took a line from this leg here and we put it to this switch here, if we turn this switch on, then this leg can go out to here through that switch to this leg, and the cap discharges. So if we throw 10 volts at this and then we put an oscilloscope on here, what we see is that, and that's where it charges up through pin 13 and those two opto-isolated relays, and then discharges through pin 9 and that one opto-isolated relay. And I put a little ammeter, Arduino, let's call the whole thing off. And here is the code for that. So of course you want to, I just like define everything to start with, and then as I need it, I'll so there, you know, you mention the pins to it and you let it know we're using only output now. There's no like sensor like with the spinning rotor or something. And we say pin 13 high, and this is as fast as that switch can go, and that's because this cap is very small and so it doesn't need much time, but that's as fast as it can go. And that's 100 is about as fast as these will switch off. Now I may look for others that might be marginally better, but you're not gonna get down to, you know, 1-2 microseconds like you could with a MOSFET. And well, this thing can only go to about 2 microseconds unless you really start to hack it. I'm getting off topic. And then pin 9 goes high, and I'm having that go high for 300 microseconds, and then it goes low for 120. That's just to shut it off. As I said, that could be down to about 100. Now, one other thing I'll mention real quick. So there's 60, 165, 300, 120. I had this set up. I don't know if they were the same numbers. 60, 165, 300, 120. 60, 165, 300, 120. So we can sum those, and we see that this cycle from when you charge it to when it charges the next time takes a total of 640 microseconds, or that many seconds. We know that we're running at 10 volts, and we know the capacitor is 0.01 microfarads. So we know that there are that many millicoulombs, coulombs being equal to voltage times capacitance. So 10 times 0.01, and now divide it by 1,000 to go from micro to milli. So you have that many millicoulombs. We know if we take 1 over this number, that's how many times it happens in a second. We know that an amp is defined as the flow of 1 coulomb per second. So if we take this, times it by 1,562, times this, millicoulombs, we get 0.156 milliamps is what this is putting out, 0.15. That may sound like overkill, but it actually became important to me as I went along here. Is like, wait a minute, are you kidding me? So let's drive on. So the two pieces with red tape are one contiguous line, and the ones without tape are the other contiguous line. So now, what happens if we replace this with one of the strands of a bifilar? So we replace it with coil there. I think you know. It'll ring. So now we've placed this on here, and we can see on the oscilloscope it's ringing. And it is ringing at a frequency based from the capacitance and the induction. So the resonant frequency is 1 over 2 pi times the square root of LC. And that gives you that. It's going down based off of how good of a Q factor you have. So it's ringing fairly well. Again, this doesn't, I'm guessing this is probably a Q right here of around 40, maybe 45. And I would like to get at least up to 80 or 100, 120. Above 100 would be nice. Now we see a tiny bit of strangeness here, that this is gone. I'm gonna, well, no, I can't do that. This has gone from 0.15, 0.16 up to 0.21. We look here, look at where it ended on the resonant frequency. It ended below 0. So let's now talk about something else. If we look at this code, there are 4 epochs. There's the time when pin 13 is high and the cap is being charged. There's the time when that is being shut off and then left off. Then there's the time when pin 9 goes high, and that's discharging the cap through the coil. And then there's the time when that shuts off. And as I got further involved, I realized all 4 of these are important. But you can do sort of a frequency sweep on the Arduino. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to define an integer called on time. And 320 sounds good, because right now we have our discharge, which is giving these at 300. So we're going to say, no, let's set that to on time. I haven't done this yet, but what we should see is as this ends up either here or here or here, this amp draw should be higher or lower. And if it's ending up here, it should be lower than when we were just playing, you know, boom, boom, square wave, boom, boom, square wave, because now you'd be starting here. So let's see if it actually does that. I haven't done this yet. So I'm compiling now. Let's see what we get. Okay, 0.07. Did you see it? Now it went to point. I can't do them both at the same time for you. See, that's a lot. Now start moving the other way. Now that's coming down. That's now lower than just the thing. Now it's almost nothing that you're putting in to recharge the cap there. And so that was fun. You know, one last thing I'd say just before going on. This is not that distant from the setup that Tesla had. I hate to, oh, Tesla, but it's not. And the reason being is that he was taking a capacitor and charging it up to 20,000 volts using a spark gap to gap to arc the gap into a coil, and then was transforming that up into potentially millions of volts. This is a 1-to-1 transformer, so, and I'm running at 10 volts, so none of that. But you think about it, everything's opto-isolated. So charging the cap part, exactly the same. Then it's opto-isolated, and we're discharging a cap into a coil. And this gives you, the spark gap also gives you isolation, is the point I'm making. The spark jumps across, then the spark stops, and there's an air gap. Here you have an air gap, back to there, because they're opto-isolated relays. They're triggered by LEDs, so there's no electrical connection there. It's blocked here because they're MOSFETs, so it's kind of similar, a similar setup. So we have that out of the way. Now the next thing is we're using one of these, but we have the other wind, so we should do something with it. So the normal thing that you do, and this is a normal transformer, is you take it, and this is what we'll do now. We'll put one end there, we'll put the other end here. Let's get rid of this for the moment. So I think I was saying, now we've got the other wind, so let's set this up like you would a conventional transformer. We'll take the other wind, we're going to put it out to a cap of equivalent capacitance to this one. If you just put it in a big one, it's like a dead short to that. You can get away with a small one, but okay, so I'm going to put the other one in now, and you see what happened there. Boom. There are two things that happened. One, the amplitude of the oscillation decreased, and two, the frequency decreased. So the frequency is now dependent on both of these in parallel. It would appear the frequency slowed down, the resonant frequency, and this is to be expected. The induction that was pulsed out there is now going into both of those, and so it's half as much. Not quite half as much. It's actually a little bit better than that. Actually, a decent bit better. But that's what you get, and that's very like a conventional transformer, except for, of course, we're using a cap here and not an AC power source. But that's what you'd expect to find. Boom, and oh well, we'll take some off. Says Mr. Lenz. That's not so easy, is it? Boom, and you lose some there. Now the other thing I'll say is you can do frequency sweeps like we just did on all four of these intervals, and of course it'll like end there instead of there, but you don't really see much difference. Maybe a tiny bit, but it's certainly not dramatic. Now, where all holy hell breaks loose, not literally, thankfully, is when you attach an earth ground. Now you have to be careful here, because if you put a meter, like a regular meter there, that's fine. If you attach the other channel of the oscilloscope, this is grounded, so as soon as you attach it there, it changes the behavior entirely. It's sort of like a Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. The act of measuring it changes what you see. So what we'll do is put this line, I'm not going to hook up the other channel, but I'm going to hook up the ground from here to here. So I've hooked up the ground, but I haven't made any connections here. Now the other thing that I will say and that I'll demonstrate is that once you have the ground hooked up, the other part of the coil, if it were, chemistry, you would say that it has, how do they say it, chirality. It has handedness. In other words, it behaves differently if this one's going to ground or if the other one's going to ground. Now, Nikolai, is that how you say it? Nikolai Tesla gave a patent for a way to hook up. Now, of course, he had better ones than this. They were single layer bifilars, very high Q. And the way he said to do it was you take this one here is this strand, so the other strand, you can look at his patent, but it's, let's see, this one is from the top, right? Ooh, come on. Yeah, positive. Here's your positive from the top. So we want, if I got this right, we want this one going to the negative, but then I'll also show you get really interesting behavior when you reverse it as well. So we can do both. And I know you're all jealous, but I myself have a 2-channel oscilloscope. So I'm actually going to hook up the other channel. I never thought I'd make use of it. So when we hook this up, and the arrangement in Tesla's patent, let's see, no, that's not it. And, okay, wait a minute. Okay, let's see if I got it. Okay, so I'm going to take this one and hook it up to here. I'm not, let me try that again. I'm just going to take this wire and hook it to ground. There's nothing going out here yet. I'm just putting this other secondary and this particular wind to ground, and kaboom, which is really neat. However, that's kind of a surprise. 0.16 to 0.51. Let's see what we actually got here, though. So where to begin with this? And we haven't yet even put the other part of the wind to here so that it's going to the capacitor like you would with conventional. All we've done is the one wind out to here. And we have this, and we have this. So let's start with this first and then talk about that. Okay, I changed the timing a little. We're actually now a little bit closer to, just when you're discharging the cap. It looks like that on the oscilloscope. So let's do another one of those sort of frequency sweeps of one of those 4 epochs. And let's start with something silly, which is how long we charge the cap. Now we can see from there, the cap is charged to 10 volts. It's not going to get charged past 10 volts. So if we change this, I mean, it's not going to change anything. So what we'll do is we will set on time equal to 60, and we'll set this equal to on time, and then when it comes out, we'll pause for half a second, we'll add 5. So 60, 65, 70, and let's see what it does. Okay, we got that. I'm hitting compile now. And let's see what happens. Okay, there we go, 60. Now that. I spent all this time looking at Q factor, and it's all gone. Look at that, the Q factor is gone. All of it. Oh wait, no, it's coming back. No, we're okay now. This is the time that the cap is charging. So when I looked at this, I kind of realized, all right, we're not in Kansas anymore. And there's a little bit more to this than I thought. Now, we're not going to do it right now, but we can also kind of see that this thing is varying as well, the amp draw, which is astonishing as well. But look at that. I mean, this is just the same thing going. And now there's no oscillations, and then there are a lot. Just give it a minute. Yeah. Okay. So we just varied the on time, which is that segment there. And I'll just give you the other 3 segments or epochs here. This is where it shut off, and kaboom. That's what happened to the voltage. This is where it discharged, boom. This is where we shut off the discharge, there. And I'll just show you one of them here is this where we shut it off. Let's make that, let's do something crazy, 1,750. Compile. Maybe it won't show. Yeah, so there you see that. And you can do that. Let's put that back to that. And now we'll show where this one shut off. We'll make that 1,150. And we put this one back to its original value. And compile. Oh, I screwed something up, sorry. Compile. Okay, see? So those are your different epochs there. So to start to scratch the surface on this, the next thing one might think to do is to take our two-channel oscilloscope. And we've got the negative hooked up to here, and we'll take the positive and hook it up to the other thing, which, you know, this is not hooked up to a cap or anything. We're just seeing what's going on. That's what's going on when we get the fuller picture. So I draw your attention to a couple or a few things here. Now this is just this line. It doesn't have a cap hooked up. But the first thing, well, one is that it's oscillating, and it's oscillating while that cap is just flat out charged. And this one doesn't care. Oh, we're going to oscillate away. That's getting annoying. The second thing is that when the cap charged, it brought this up, because you can see the deformation there of the previous oscillation, and we could let this one die out, and you would still see this, that this charging up brought this up, which is interesting. The third thing that I don't really know what to make of, this wire is oscillating more slowly than when it gets linked up with the 0.01 UF cap, which, if that's a real thing, would mean that the capacitance of the coil itself is greater than 0.01. And then from here we can see it follows along. It follows along with its friend and brother there. So what if instead of just the wires there, we now hook a cap up across the two wires, just like you would in a conventional transformer, and see what happens. These are both matched. They're not exactly. This is like 1, and that's 1.03. Okay, at first glance it looks like that, but I think you recall what we just did before. Just changing that. Let me find a parameter to change. Okay, instead of changing the charge time, now I change the time that it's off from 175 to 150 microseconds. And now it looks like that. And so you charge one cap to 10 volts, and at this point in time, you have two caps at 10 volts. It's just kind of nice, except for we got that going on, which that's not so nice. So trust me when I tell you the strangeness is just starting. But that's pretty strange because, you know, you got this here and you got the other end of the oscilloscope here. This is an actual cap. And I've taken these, like sometimes you end up at like 15 volts and I've just plain discharged them out into another cap. But it ends up at 15 volts. I'm thinking, well, you know, is there like some floating ground thing going on? No. That cap is oscillating while this is just charged. You know, it charges up, boom, and it just oscillates, and then these two interact with each other. There is a heck of a lot more to cover. Trust me, it gets stranger from here. But I think the first thing is we're not going to go with the Tesla setup. We're going to reverse these two wires, and I'll show you something kind of neat and goofy there. So here we're doing the opposite. Remember I said it was chiral, and I've paused it. But here's what we're getting on the oscilloscope. So with it hooked up this way, we see it's still oscillating while the cap is charged, charging and charged, but it doesn't get the spike up. So that's different. And then it goes here, and now they're 180 degrees out of phase the whole time. And to talk a little bit of smack before I wrap up this first video, this part from here to here, that's your pure scalar wave generator, isn't it? I think so. Because this voltage there is exactly opposite this voltage. They sum to 0. and the magnetic field will be 90 degrees out of phase, but it'll also be exactly opposite, summing to zero. The electric fields and the magnetic fields sum to zero here, and they sum to zero here. However, there's a difference of maybe 15 volts here and zero there. So all there is to it is a scale. If my understanding is at all correct, I mean, there's scalar waves being thrown off here, but there's also a change in the magnetic and electric field. Here, the magnetic and electric field sum to zero, but there's a change in the magnetic and electric field's magnitude. Boom, boom. And what some people posit is that that change itself has discernible effects. I don't know if that's, I suspect it's true, but I don't know. If we zoom in a little, yeah, I got it right. And that kind of looks like something familiar, doesn't it? It kind of looks like the ancient caduceus, the two intertwined snakes on the stick. And it also kind of looks like the double helix. And how did they come up with the two intertwined snakes on a stick like that thousands of years ago? So I'm done talking smack. So I'm done with the first part, and now we'll go on to part 2 in the next video, and it gets stranger. It gets much, much stranger. It's hard to believe, huh? But it does. So until then, stay healthy. Talk to you later.